Hello, everyone. I'm here today with J. Allen Tucker. He's the author of Sylas Sterling and the Lucas County Curse. It's just published in February of 2021. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So what does it feel like to have your book out in the world and for everyone to read? Is that nerve-wracking, or what does that feel like?
It's a little scary, I guess. Most of the people at this point, honestly, are friends and family who've read it, that I'm aware of, at least. I know some people have checked it out on Kindle Unlimited and things like that, and I don't obviously know who every single person who's ordered things, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from like my mom, aunts, friends from high school, things like that, and so that's been nice. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be bad things at some point, because that's part of putting yourself out there in the world, some sort of negative responses and things, but it'll be okay.
Yeah. How do you deal with negative responses, whether it's coming from a stranger on the internet or a family member, even if it's constructive criticism? Does that sometimes get difficult to swallow?
I mean, it depends, I guess, on what the circumstance is. Like, if it's just some random person, it doesn't bother me as much. I mean, if it was someone closer to me, it would bother me a little more.
Yeah. Of course. So for people who aren't familiar with the book, how would you describe it to them?
I kind of say, I don't know if I ever put this on Twitter specifically, because usually Twitter's so short. On like Facebook or some other places, I've described it as sort of a Scooby-Doo meets Hardy Boys meets Stranger Things. Something like that. I mean, it's as far as a generic, it's none of those things. It's kind of bits and pieces of things like those things. Overall, I'd say it's like a young adult mystery with a touch of supernatural elements.
I'd agree with that. I think that's pretty close. And it's Stranger Things if it was in the 90s.
Yeah, definitely the 90s.
Because I'm definitely a 90s kid. So the book was like a nostalgia bomb.
Nice.
I mean, when I would take breaks between reading, I really had to stop and wonder what year it was, because there's so many details from the 90s in it. And I wondered, did you even, there's even, I'm not going to, no spoilers, but there's a couple of mentions in the book about track lists and time between tracks on certain CDs that characters are listening to. Yeah. I actually went back and was checking track times to see if you got looked into that. Did you do a lot of research on?
I did, yeah. Like, well, as much as I could. Like, I mean, yeah, like spoilers, but like one of the characters in particular, it's a Monday night, and they're at home. They see part of the news. And one of the things on the news is a certain person has died. It was Vincent Price had died, and so that date that I picked for the story, I looked to see significant people who had passed away, and like I describe an episode of The Fresh Prince, and that's the episode that aired that night.
Wow.
Things like that. Cool. At one point, I mentioned one of the moms is watching Oprah, so I was able. It was kind of hard, but I actually found what the Oprah episode was about on that date. that one took a little more effort. Just kind of silly things. Just to like, I tried to make it grounded in what was actually going on. Like I made sure that the video games were released, the albums that were actually released to the public, things like that.
Yeah. Even some of the jokes in it. There was a page I had marked about have you and your friend Daniel got into Grandpa's old cough medicine?
Oh yeah, Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah, I got a big kick out of that one. That was pretty good.
Of Dumb and Dumber, I'm working on the second book right now, and that first book takes place in October, Halloween, basically, of '93. The second book is going to take place at Christmas break '94, and so literally the opening chapter of the story is several of the friends are going to see Dumb and Dumber on opening night.
Oh, that's cool.
So I don't know. It just happened to be the thing that I was thinking of Christmas '94, and I'm like, oh, perfect. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah. So how is the sequel coming along? Are you making pretty good progress on it?
I think I'm almost 8,000 words into it, which isn't like a huge number, but a decent chunk of things. I mean, the action hasn't really gotten going yet. It's still more of the, here what is somewhat of the aftermath of the first book. Again, not to spoil anything, but just things happen, and there's different ways those things could progress into the next story. And I was thinking about this the other day, and to some degree, it's the fifth Harry Potter book in my mind, almost. Um, just because no one believed that Voldemort was back, after he came back and killed Cedric. And so that's not that I'm trying to rip off Harry Potter, but as I've written about 8,000 words, I'm like, yeah, I've turned this into that next Harry Potter book when everyone believed Harry.
So do you have the sequel planned, or does it just evolve on its own?
A little of both.
Okay.
I've got ideas for book 2, but not all the specifics. Definitely not all the specifics. And I've got ideas for book 3, like a really pretty good idea for book 3.
Oh, wow.
And then I have a notion of book 4. Because, I mean, basically, in my head, I'm just like picking out like different things that would happen. Like I said, the boys were in juniors in high school in this first book. They're in the middle of their senior year in the second book. And in the third book, I'm thinking they would go on a summer vacation after graduation, basically. Not that gives away any real plot spoilers or anything, but that's kind of the progression. And I would assume if it goes past the third book, they would, one or more of them would be in some college type situation, or I don't know. I don't have as much of a notion of what would be past the third book, really, but definitely something, I suppose, if I wanted it to be.
Because really a movie, or a story like a group of teenagers over summer vacation is pretty 90s. I would say there's a lot of great movies from that would fit into the fit into it pretty good. When did you start working on the first book? Did you start a long time ago, or
a little bit? I wrote most of it. I'm trying to get this number straight in my head. I think it was the summer of 2017. I think I wrote probably 65-70% of the book. And I got stuck. I don't remember exactly what chapter it was. I could go back and figure it out, but I just wasn't sure how to get to the end. I knew vaguely what I want the ending to be, but I wasn't sure what the next step was. I think, I don't know, but yeah. So anyway, I'd basically stopped working on it because I couldn't figure out what to do next. And occasionally I would go back, I'd reread it, I'd edit a few things, I'd try to come up with something. I just never could really come up with anything. And then finally, I think it was September of last year, so September 2020, I really got back in there and actually had some ideas of, okay, this is the next step. And once I figured out the next step, I went on to the end of the book. But it was just figuring out that next step was the hard part for me. And I guess that's the point where a lot of people don't finish and don't publish things. I'm sure there's thousands, if not millions, of people that have half a novel or comic book or whatever they've worked on, and just sitting there on their computer that they never finished.
Do you have any books that you started and just never finished for whatever reason?
Oh yeah, I started one in college, and I think around the year 1999 or 2000, that I'd written. At this point, not very much. Like looking back at that time, I thought it was a lot, but now it's not much at all. But that one, it was funny though. I think I had a good idea, and I think had I actually written that book, it could have been something. It was my. They've even made a movie with the title that I was working on then, and not that it matters now. But I was working on a book I had called Labor Day, and and it was going to be a killer who only kills people on Labor Day. So kind of like a Friday the 13th, but just once a year. And I had this tagline of everybody else takes the day off, but not the killer, or something stupid. But the whole point of that book was going to be, had I finished it, like a multiple personality thing, which has been done to death now. But 20 years ago, I don't think I'd really seen that too much. Like Fight Club had come out, so I guess that might have been part of that or something. But apart from that, there wasn't a lot of stories like that. But there's been tons of stories like that with all sorts of different movies and books since then. So I think that ship sailed, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it better than the ones I've seen and read. So, but there's other ones. There was one I started like 9 years ago that I picked back up after the finished Sylas Sterling Lucas County Curse. And I basically took what I had as kind of a outline and just started over, really from the beginning. And I think I'm about 11,000 words into that story. Um, and that's a futuristic kind of dystopian, most of the world's dead kind of book. But it would still be still be young adult though. I mean, it's in the same. It's not the same vein as like a Sylas Sterling because the world is destroyed, but um, it'd still be like a young adult, like nothing too gory or too crazy.
Are most things that you write kind of young adults? Nothing too far out of bounds. Is that kind of
Yeah,
your style?
yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's just what I would. I don't know. Like I know my mom's gonna read it, so I don't want anything too weird to be in it. Mostly, and so like my mom's read my book a few times. I know at least twice, and she's told me she really liked it. But she's the person I got a lot of my love for the nerdy things in life from. Like she was when she was growing up, she was a big Star Trek fan. Like when it was first on, and so like we always saw those type of things. She would take us to see Star Wars and all the she likes that type of stuff like just like I do. So she was like an old school fangirl, I guess, before fangirls were cool.
Before they were a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there any characters in the book that you modeled after people you knew or know?
Yes. But not. There's no one that's like a copy of anyone. Like Silas's friends Daniel and Jonathan are definitely inspired by a couple of my friends from school, but it's like a loose thing. So basically, so I'd have a picture in my head more than anything. It's not like any specific detail particularly. And like one of the characters, I mean, one of the characters I named after a friend of mine who's a school counselor. And so when I wanted to mention a school counselor, I'm like, well, Mrs. Canister is the school counselor. And she read the book and she's like, oh, I had 15 minutes of fame there or whatever. So,
Oh, that's cool.
but yeah, yes, but and no. I mean, but I guess that would probably be true for most authors. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how everybody else does it, but a little of modeling after some people.
The friends, when reading it, the friends felt like real people. When I read it, they
Right.
felt like they felt like someone. They felt like they were real, like there was someone that you had in mind when you wrote it. That's why I was wanting to pick your brain about that one.
Well, I was trying to. I mean, it's been a while, but I was trying to picture, what I would do if it was Saturday morning and my two friends showed up at my house, or what would we do? We play video games, or we'd go to the mall, or we something. So that's a lot of it, just trying to like what would I do, and especially as I was going through the week, and because the whole story does take place over that one week. I was definitely trying to pull, okay, this would happen, that would happen. And one of the things I try to do in that first book, and I'm trying to do in the second book, that the stuff happens, at least from the surface level, by accident. Like there's nothing planned. Like the boys stumble into this thing that happens. Not at all what they were trying to find or looking for. It found them. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Did you do any research for? Because I wondered, reading the book, if you researched any real crimes or any real like folk stories, or like every place has their own stories. The creepy house in the neighborhood or whatever. Was there anything that you took inspiration from, or any cases that you researched to kind of take from and include in the book?
I mean, not specifically. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I like Lore with Aaron Mahnke. So I've definitely heard hundreds of stories like that. And I listen to some other podcasts similar to that, but nothing specific. Now, I would say, at least partially, the early on in the book. Now, again, I don't think this is much of a spoiler. Early on in the book, it talks about in 1986, a girl went missing, and it was a big media circus in this small little town. After I left my hometown, like years ago, like 20 some odd years ago, I don't honestly remember exactly when this happened, one of the local teachers disappeared, and there was a big media thing, and that was the first time that I know that my hometown was ever on TV, and anyone ever heard of it, because no one would have heard of it otherwise. And so that, in a slight little tiny way, that was kind of inspired some of that, all the people pressing in on the little town and the sheriff and things.
Yeah, there was another part that I had marked in the book that I thought was interesting. Speaking of of crimes, but um, the disappearance shocked the town, and it was obvious to everyone in Lucasville that Tracy had never gotten over the disappearance and the death. Most agreed that she needed help, but no one seemed to offer any real assistance. And that seems real just in general with situations like that. I think people that kind of struck me as that's usually what happens is everyone's kind of apprehensive or afraid to offer
Yeah.
help, even though someone needs it. So that paragraph I thought was it kind of got to me. You could feel the awkward tension or everyone
Yeah.
feels like they should do something, but no one does anything.
Right. And like she had become like the biggest outcast because of what happened to her, and it wasn't her fault that her sister disappeared. But obviously she was suffering from stress or post-traumatic something that would cause her to break down. But yeah, I mean, if you read the story, I don't think her family was much help with
Right.
that particular thing. So that definitely doesn't help.
Yeah, definitely not. So obviously the 90s were a big inspiration for for the story because you based it in the 90s and you spent time making sure that it was of the time. What do you miss most about that time period? What kind of media did you enjoy the most from the 90s?
I don't know. One thing about the '90s, I mean, it was better than the '80s in a lot of ways. I mean, we had all the '80s stuff like I grew up with the '80s stuff, and I still like the '80s stuff. So I was still watching Back to the Future and Ghostbusters, but
Yeah.
by then our family had a copy of those, and I could watch those anytime I wanted. So that's a bonus because most of the '80s I didn't have that luxury. I mean, most of the stuff as far as the media goes, I mean, with like Apple Music, I can listen to just about any song I want to. Not every song, but just about any song. Um, and then like the video games and stuff, like the Nintendo Switch has the Nintendo Switch Online. You can play most of those old Super Nintendo games on there. Not all of them, but like 40 or 50 of them anytime you want. So that's pretty cool. But I don't know. It was definitely a different time as far as media. Like I don't think young people now know what a CD is almost.
It's scary.
Like I'm thinking, I've bought a few of these, and I was thinking maybe doing a giveaway at some point, like a little prize pack. And I've got a couple of them on the shelf back there somewhere. Like I bought a Pearl Jam CD, I bought a Spin Doctor CD, and they're unopened. I'd ordered them off Amazon, and I was like, oh, I could give these away, but I'm like, well, does anybody actually want a CD anymore? So I don't know.
I still buy them. I go to the local record shop.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, I like having something in your hand. It's kind of
Yes.
nice.
Yeah, like I have quite a few Blu-rays and DVDs and things behind me. I don't like how we are moving more and more to that digital space where we don't own anything and we don't really have a copy of it, just because they can take it away or they can edit it. I'd rather have the copy back there.
Yeah, I
Generally.
agree. And you mentioned the 90s being better than the 80s, and I don't know if you agree here, but I think a big plus in the 90s column over the 80s is the lack of hair metal.
I liked the hair metal when I was
Oh, you did?
a 10, 11-year-old. My older brother was 9 years older than me. And so, he was listening to the Motley Crue and the Rad and the Van Halen and Bon Jovi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Poison. And so I was a fan of those things just because he had them. He'd have, when I was a little younger, he had the albums, and I was a little older, he had the cassettes and
Yeah.
CDs and stuff. So
You
was a big
had
fan of
asked.
Kiss.
Oh,
Like
he was.
randomly, he was a big fan of Kiss when he was like 10 or 11. And so that was one of those things when I was early. Some of my first words were Kiss related because he was when I was like I don't know, 1-year-old. Whenever you start talking, he was trying to get me to say like Ace, Kiss, things like that. Yeah, just random.
Do you find inspiration from any types of media? Well, you're right. Do you
Oh
listen to
yeah,
music or
definitely.
anything?
There's a couple soundtracks I like to listen to. I'm a big fan of the Thor Ragnarok soundtrack. I like the Thor: The Dark World is the one I listen to a whole bunch. Here recently, I've been listening to the Spider-Man Far From Home soundtrack. Some when I write, I like to have something going, especially if I want to do something that's not just mundane, because some of the stuff's kind of mundane in the book. I mean, honestly, a lot of the nostalgia stuff is, oh, like Sylas is in his bedroom, look, there's a comic book, oh, there's a thing. Some of that could be a little boring if you don't like those things, but if there's something more action oriented happening, I like to have the music, kind of blaring in my ears.
Yeah, there seems to be a desire in the last few years by at least a decent amount of people to kind of get the retro stuff and to play the Super Nintendo games and to, people buying cassettes. What do you think that stems from? Is that just people want to relive those memories, or is there something more genuine about that time?
I don't know. I think most of it's one of two things probably. Either it's just this nostalgia because people look back to when life was simple, they didn't have responsibilities or bills or whatever, and it's like, oh, my life was so easy when I played with Transformers or GI Joe or whatever. And so, but the other part of that, I think people have that kind of the hipster thing. We're like, well, I'm going to do all the retro stuff because it's cool again. I don't know, like stuff's like the old stuff's expensive now. I mean, before you could get a VHS tape of Back to the Future for like 50 cents or $1. Now it'd probably cost you, I don't know, 15, 20 bucks on eBay. I wouldn't be surprised. Just because people are looking for those things more, like you said, like cassettes, records prices have gone up dramatically. From a few years ago. Nobody wanted them like 15, 20 years ago. They were giving them away just about, and now they're expensive. So, there's cycles, I guess.
Yeah. There were Frisbees a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, even during the 90s, when I had the Super Nintendo, at that time, I was like, well, I don't need my old Nintendo anymore. I've got something better. So I sold it. Whereas, now I've went out and got another one just because I wanted to have one again. Yeah.
I was reading the book. I was wondering, are there challenges writing a story that unravels? I don't know if you could call it a mystery thriller, but the story unravels as you go. What are the challenges in writing a story like that to not give too much away and to kind of hold back? Do you have any tricks that you use? Or
well, one thing I really figured out at the end, like I'd gotten on well, you can kind of see up here behind me on the shelf. There's a shelf full of the books at the top, and there's like a whole half the shelf is full of like proof copies. I ordered, I want to say 3 rounds of proof copies because it was easier for me to see the mistakes in paper with mark them out, make a note versus always doing it on the computer. And so I ordered the first round. I let my wife was starting to read it. I'd given it to one of my friends locally. And I found a whole bunch of things. I'm like, okay, y'all need to stop because I'm gonna have to fix some stuff. And so that's when the second round came out. Because at one point I called, there's lots of little things. So I changed the names of characters quite several times. Like Sylas is something I came up with very late into the book. I was probably almost finished when I came up with Sylas Sterling. For the longest time, his name was Ryan Sterling, and before that, I don't remember exactly what it was. But it was Ryan for a whole bunch of the time. And his friend Daniel for a long time was Michael. And so at one point near the end of the book, it was like this pivotal moment. And it's like, and Michael said, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, oops. I had to fix that. And there was a couple other little things just because especially having that break, there was a kind of a big break. And so I had described how a certain character died early on, just briefly. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to where I was at later, I had changed that, and I didn't realize that I hadn't corrected the earlier version until I saw it in print. I was like, oh, okay, I got to change that. So there were issues in trying to make sure everything flowed together and all the things make sense. There was one thing in there I think it throws people off the track if they notice it. It's one sentence. It's about a character's brother, and it's the family situation is addressed later on, so it actually makes sense. But at that time, it wouldn't make it doesn't matter at the time. You wouldn't know that it makes any sense or not any sense at that moment. But anyway, I don't want to spoil anything.
we can have
But something that small, like so and so and so and so, blah blah blah, could throw things off theoretically.
Yeah. And we can have a spoiler section at the end. That way, people aren't spoiled from the story. Were there any characters that didn't make the cut? that you had in mind originally, and you decided to pull them?
Well, overall, I didn't include a lot of characters, really. I mean, there's a few background characters. There's some like bullies. There's a couple of classmates that are mentioned once or twice. I mean, because there's literally would be hundreds of people roaming around the high school, people at the hospital. I mean, there's different little settings. But I didn't really want to. I don't, my wife's reading or listening to a book right now, and it's from an author we both really like. But this particular book is set in space, and so everybody has weird names, and there's just dozens and dozens of characters, and so she can't keep track of who's who. And I'm like, man, I kind of wouldn't understand that, because the other books we've liked by this same author have been, I don't know, 6 or 8 main people with a few people around the periphery, but not like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens. So I wouldn't say there's anyone who missed the cut, but there are definitely people who could be fleshed out more, or like for one character in particular we can talk about a little later, but we don't know much of anything about at all, really. So there's definitely more that can be expounded upon. And then I don't know, like, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't know, just there's definitely more characters that could come in, and there are new characters coming in for the second book, at least early on, even in the first 8,000 words. There's a few new characters, but anyway, we can go to the next thing, I guess.
I think the amount of characters in the book gave you more of that smaller town feeling. So to me, it made sense that there wasn't a ton of characters in it.
Yeah.
And I think when you're younger, I think you have more of a tunnel vision, and you don't really see everything else that's going on in the world. So
that's true.
It kind of made sense to me.
Yeah, I think I described the town at some point. It has like 4,000 people in it. It's very small. Very, very small. Oh, just fun fact about Lucas County, Lucasville. It's named after George Lucas, by the way.
Oh, okay.
All right. There's definitely a few Star Wars references in there. Couple. One in particular. I really like the Timothy Zahn Thrawn books. Those are some of my favorite Star Wars media that's been out there ever. So I remember there's one point mentioning that. Anyway,
I'm kind of disappointed in myself. I didn't catch the Lucas reference there. I should have caught that.
Well, it's kind of it's not like straightforward, I guess. I mean, there is actually, after I named it that, I did find out there is a Lucas County and a Lucasville in Ohio. So hopefully no one will be mad that I wrote a book about a curse in Lucasville, even though it's a different state and whatnot. But yeah. I don't.
Hopefully not.
I do think this was funny. Like I mentioned all the products and restaurants and companies and video games and all those things, but all the towns are made up. Like the settings are made up, but the things in the settings are real. I don't know, like the Val Mesa. I have this town Val Mesa that's mentioned a few times. That's made up, and then Lucasville's made up. I've made up another town called Trenton for the second book.
Trenton.
There's a Trenton, New Jersey, but I think that's the only one I found in the U.S. So I do try to look at those things when I'm coming up with different names.
Does that get exhausting, researching different names and making sure that it's nothing terrible happened in some town somewhere?
That's a good point. I think more about it with the characters, like with Sylas. Like Sylas spelled, like I spelled it funny, because normally Sylas would be spelled with an I, not a Y. And I did that just to make it different. Just because I didn't want a name that you could just Google or Facebook or whatever, and there's 15 of them. I wanted to try to find something unique that wasn't out there, and I couldn't find anything for that on like Google or wherever, and there wasn't a @Sylas Sterling on Twitter, and so that sort of thing. So I have @Sylas Sterling on Twitter and Instagram. I don't know if I went any further than that on other social media, but yeah. So try to be safe. Right. And so like for the main character in the dystopian one, I'm like a fifth of the way through or whatever. I came up with something that I couldn't find anywhere else. No, this ancillary people I didn't really think that was as important. But the main person I wanted to, like Harry Potter, just as an example, there are lots of people in the world named Harry Potter. That's not that uncommon. And so I wouldn't want my main character of my book series to be a common name.
Yeah.
I don't know. And the same thing with the author name. Like I chose my specific version of my name because of the things on Amazon. There's some not so nice things under what other names I might have chosen on Amazon. So that was one of the reasons, because I wanted to go with J.A. Tucker, and then there were some things on there, and I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to go with a different one, and I didn't. Anyway, I chose the name I chose. I mean, it's still my name, but I chose that on purpose.
Yeah.
So
You got to be careful.
Yeah.
How much do reviews help with getting the book out there? And I know it's still fresh, but do reviews help, and just word of mouth, or how can we help independent authors get their books out there and help spread the word? What's the best way you would think?
I mean, I think for me personally, I think Amazon reviews help a lot, just because people can see that other people have actually bought the thing and have actually read it. I think for a lot of people, Goodreads is another way. Like I haven't really been active on Goodreads. I've had a personal Goodreads account like years ago that's attached to my Kindle and stuff. So I made a new one for my author page. But I haven't really got very active on there, just because you only have so much time in the day. You can't do everything. But I mean, I guess theoretically though, those would be two good ways for people to do like a review.
Speaking of because I know you have a day job and you have other responsibilities. How difficult is it managing your time to write and to edit and to develop new ideas and still work and family time and other hobbies? What are some challenges with that?
Like I think a lot of writers probably have some schedule where they wake up at 5 a.m. I mean, I see that on Twitter, like the 5 a.m. Writers Club or something like that. And so people get up really early and maybe write for an hour or two before they have to go to work or whatever. I'm not an early riser. That's not ever going to be me, I don't think. I mean, I get up when I have to, but I don't get up earlier than I have to, as far as that goes. But I don't have a set schedule. I think I would probably benefit from a set schedule. It's just it's hard in my line of work. As we've talked about, off camera a little bit, like I get these support calls, for lack of a better term, like IT kind of things, and so it's hard to schedule things. It's hard to do a lot of things. I mean, I have tons of free time, but then I also feel like I don't, because at any moment, whatever I'm doing can be interrupted. Whether if I'm making a YouTube video or writing or going to dinner with my wife or whatever, like someone can call and they have an emergency, everything's on fire or whatever. I mean, not literally on fire, but it's all falling apart. Save us, kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I basically write when I have time and when I have ideas. It's pretty much what it comes down to. Like yesterday, I wrote a little bit. It wasn't a lot, but while I was driving around, I came up with some ideas of what would happen next, just thinking about the scene that I had set. It doesn't, no spoiler or whatever, but the Daniel, Jonathan, and Sylas, I guess that is a spoiler. Anyway, the friends
I'll mark it. I'll mark it on the video so people can avoid it.
Some of the Sylas and his friends go to Sam Goody's, and so they're looking through CDs, and then they're in a different town. And so I'm like, okay, this would be a good opportunity for some of these other characters from the first movie or the first book to show back up and, antagonize them, basically. So I'm thinking, I haven't written it yet, but like Jason and Mickey are going to show up and mess with them at Sam Goody's, just as an example. But I was thinking of that interaction while I was driving around. I was like, okay, I've got a little not necessarily a one-liner, but like something that Jason or Mickey could say to him to like pick on him, basically, something like that.
Do you write those ideas down somewhere, or do you type them in your phone, or
how do you keep track? I do put a lot of things in notes on my phone. Like before I started writing this second book, I have like a little note of just like little things I'd kind of jotted down with some ideas. So yeah. But like this particular thing we're talking about right now, I haven't written it down.
Oh, okay.
It was yesterday, and it's still fresh in my mind of what I want to add next.
Yeah. You know, speaking of support calls, they always seem to come in when you're sitting down for dinner with your wife, or when you have something special planned and you just sit down and the food comes and your phone rings and it's bad automatically.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you for some brutal honesty here, but
okay.
Have you ever gotten out of a social situation and used a support call as an excuse?
I mean, a little bit. Well,
like Alaska's down, I have to go, or something like that.
I mean, I don't remember specifically what we were doing. One of our local coffee shops hosts events quite regularly, or they were pre-COVID. I mean, they still do stuff, but it's not the same. And I remember what was going on, but I was happy to have a call at that time. It's okay. I gotta go. I gotta get to the car, and yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, sometimes I guess.
Yeah, I've used them a couple of times in the past. Just really awkward situations you want to get out of, and they can come in handy every once in a great while. I'll admit it. I've done it.
Yeah.
When you were writing and I'll try and avoid spoilers, but there were some scenes in the book where the teenagers feel like everyone's against them. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that was just teenage angst or if that was something else going on. Was that something you considered while writing the book?
Honestly, I kind of feel like a huge chunk of the town is in on this thing.
Yeah. Well, now we know that, but before I knew what was really happening, I wondered if it was just their imagination that they thought everyone was against them, or if it's really happening.
I mean, they are kind of the outcast. I mean, a little bit, being that it wasn't cool to be the nerd or the geek or whatever in 1993, like it is now. Like, the geeks are cool in 2021. Marvel and DC rule the box office or whatever. But back in those days, it wasn't the nice thing. So, I mean, it's part of that, I guess. Even if they weren't like total rejects, I guess, as far as the school goes, but they definitely weren't as high on the hierarchy as others. I mean, I even talk about that a little bit in the book. It's a small school, a small town. Everybody knows each other, but
yeah,
they're definitely lower on the totem pole or whatever the terminology you want to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You recently launched your own YouTube channel. What are your plans for it? What do you plan to do, or how do you plan to use it to connect with other authors or with readers, or both? Or
I guess a little both. Last night I recorded speaking of that, I found all this stuff really after seeing Jeff Lane's interview with you, because I really hadn't delved into AuthorTube, BookTube. I never even heard of those things until that, and I kind of expanded out into that after seeing Jeff talk with you, and then he's done lots of stuff recently, it seems like, but I've known Jeff through we both were a part of the same audience of a podcast. I mean, the podcast's still around, but Geek Out Loud, there's a whole bunch of other shows, but he and I have interacted on and off for, I don't know, like a decade, maybe a long time.
Wow.
He's one of the people that inspired me to want to write, because I'm like, well, I know this guy, he can do it, I can do it, like that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, I know you reviewed One Way not too long ago. That's my favorite of his books. I really, really like that one a lot. That's fantastic. I know he's got multiple, like 4 or 5 other ones. But anyway, so yes, I'd like to talk to Jeff on here sometime as far as YouTube goes.
Oh, cool.
I mean, since I'm acquainted with him. But anyway, I started recording yesterday the AuthorTube newbie tag. I found like 13 questions to go through. So I recorded that. And then I edited part of it. Like, I think I'm about a third of the way through editing that. I don't know. I edit stuff fairly regularly, but I'm still, it still takes a long time.
Yeah.
Just to cut out things and add in little stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a while to edit. It never seems to get that much easier. What was the best piece of advice that Jeff gave you when you were starting to write?
I don't know. We've messaged back and forth about it a few times over the years. Like under last year during when lockdown happened, everything, the whole world shut down like a year ago or whatever. we were messaging back and forth. I don't remember exactly why, but I was telling him that I was working on this book. I wanted to finish this book before all this, craziness finished. Thinking it was going to be a short amount of time, not a year long, a few weeks or whatever. And so he was very encouraging with that. And then as I got closer to the end of the book, he was encouraging with, here's some information of how to reach out to literary agents and things like that. He sent me like a link to, I want to say there were 6 different websites where you could find information about different agents that might be interested in your book or whatever.
Oh, cool.
And I did use some of those resources, and I did send out some letters or emails, really, but I mean, we call them letters, I guess. But I didn't get any responses. I'd honestly rather have gotten rejected than nothing. I guess it wasn't worth their time to respond. I don't know, but it's fine. It is what it is.
So what was it finally that made you decide to go through Amazon to publish the book and not through a traditional publisher?
Well, I'd finished it. I finished the book like 3 months before I finally decided just to hit the button, and because I had uploaded it through Amazon to order the proof copies and edit, and then did it again, changed the book cover and this, that, and the other. And so finally, I was thinking the only thing that was holding me up at that point, because I'd kind of given up on the literary agents after not really hearing anything back. The only thing that I was really thinking about of whether or not to go ahead and publish or wait was I was considering buying some ISBNs so I could have my own imprint. And one thing that kind of stalled me on that is everything I came up with that I thought would be an interesting name was taken in some form or fashion. Like the for the cover of the book, this isn't a spoiler. It does come into play in the book. The cover of the book that has a green sky on it, and at some point in the book there is a green sky, and so I was like, "Ooh, Green Skies Press or Green Skies Publishing or something." And there is something to, I think both of those are something very similar to that. I was like, "Oh, I don't know," and I kept coming up with different little things like that, and I would look, and I'm like, "Oh," and so I finally just said, I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on ISBNs right now. Let's just go ahead and hit the button and make it live.
Ultimately. So what is an ISBN? What exactly is that? Or just in a
the little barcode number on the back, basically. It's a unique identifier. I think it's 13 digits long. ISBNs are free if you go through the Amazon KDP. But if you go through like the people that they recommend for you to purchase them from, I think the cheap one is like $125 for one. And then the more you get, the cheaper they become. I want to say you could get like 10 of them for like 300 and something. I don't know. I think that I just didn't want to spend a lot of money right now. I mean, and even now, I haven't made much money off my book. I've sold a few copies. I've sold more than I thought I'd sell. But I think I've mostly broken even with what I have spent. I haven't spent a lot. I didn't hire anyone to make a cover. I didn't hire a proofreader. I didn't do a lot of the things that you could easily do and spend probably hundreds of dollars on each of those things. I did all the things myself. So that made it free apart from time. And I've ordered some business cards. I've ordered some stickers. I've ordered some keychains, just some random little promotional things. Cool. If people locally buy the book, or if someone orders a copy directly from me, I can send them some other little doodad along with the hard copy. But yeah, I think I've mostly broke even, maybe made a little bit of a profit overall. But
so what would be the benefit of going with your own ISBN versus a place like Amazon? What are the benefits to that?
Well, with that number, you could publish the hard, or not the hard, I always want to say hardback, but the hard copies, like the paperback editions, you could publish those other places. If I wanted to go to, there's a bunch of different ones, like Ingram Spark, I think is one of them, and there's other ones. But if I wanted to go some other avenues, I would have to buy an ISBN to do those other avenues, because I can't use the Amazon ISBN on those places. And then the other upside is I could say that it's published by J. Allen Tucker Books or whatever I could come up with. instead of independently published, is what it says on Amazon right now.
Oh, okay. Would you be able to pull your first book and use your own ISBN now after the fact, or once you go through Amazon, is that it?
I think I could if I change it. I don't think I could do exactly the same thing. I'm not sure what all the rules are,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think if it's different, I could. Like if it was a new edition or like the expanded, I don't know, the Stand version where it's 1,000 pages or something.
Yeah.
If it's something like that, I think I could redo it basically, which it may happen at some point. I don't know.
You had mentioned having ideas already for the third book and beyond. Do you have a number in mind for how many books you plan to take to tell the whole story?
Not particularly. But I guess if we have a spoiler discussion, I can say what I want to say about part of that later. But I basically just want to. I mean, I don't know. Like, I could keep going. It's like, and here's Silas's grandchildren or something. I don't know that I want to do that specifically. But I do plan to have my books connected. So if I do write other things, it would still be in the same world. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
I like shared universes. I mean, I haven't read a lot of Stephen King stuff. I've read a little. I'm not I don't know. I used to watch a lot of horror movies when I was a kid, but I never really read a lot of horror. I know he writes things that aren't horror. He writes all sorts of things, but I know most of his things take place around Derry, Maine, or whatever, or somewhere near, whatever, Maine. It's all kind of the same vibe or whatever. And I think they made a TV show not too long ago where all the characters kind of cohabitate or something. I don't know, but I would like something like that, I guess, over the course of many books or series or whatever happens.
Yeah. Other than our friend Jeff Lane, is there another author that you would want to sit down and have a chat with and just pick their brain?
I mean, there's 2 or 3 I could think of off the top of my head, but they're like, famous, and so they wouldn't talk to me. I wouldn't think.
Well, if you could, if you could pick any.
One of my favorites is Ernest Cline. I don't know, have you read the Ready Player One, Ready Player Two, Armada, those kind of things?
I'm ashamed to say I haven't.
Like they're nerdy or geeky or whatever word you want to use to the extreme. Like it's like my book is pretty nerdy and geeky or whatever, but it moves away from that and gets into the story. Like I don't know, there's more nostalgia at the beginning and it gets less nostalgic as it goes. It gets more focused on what's happening.
Yeah.
Like the Ernest Cline stuff is just overload of everything, and I love that, but I don't want to write that. But like there's another author I really like, Scott Meyer. Are you familiar with him at all?
I've heard of him.
He has a few different. He has one series that I'm aware of, and a few other books. The one that I've gone through, I just finished book 5 yesterday. I think it was yesterday. He has a series called Magic 2.0, and he's one of those kind of like, I guess, their dream scenarios as far as a writer goes. He self-published the first book on Amazon, and I guess there was enough buzz or sales or whatever happened, and so he got picked up by an actual publisher, and now he's got 6 of those books, and he's had I don't know how many, several other books apart from that series. But like in the Magic 2.0 series, just a real brief summary, I guess, it's basically kind of like the Matrix. The whole world's a simulation, and certain people figure out that it's a simulation and get into the code. And as they get into their code, they can manipulate their entry in the file. And so then they can basically give themselves immortality. They can't be injured, all the invincible, all the things. And they can act like they have magic because they can manipulate reality, which is pretty interesting. I really like those. But he's very, very geeky. And so he mentions Dune a lot. Like he loves Dune apparently. And so there's lots of Dune references, but all sorts of music, all sorts of stuff like that. So I like those a lot.
Yeah.
So, and then another author I really enjoy, and I don't think he's had that many books, is Edward Savio.
I've heard of him.
He's got a couple books out that I'm aware of. Maybe there's more than 2, but there's only 2 that I've taken part of. what is it called? The Fight for Forever, I think is the series name. It's like an immortal. Well, no, they're not really immortal. They're the people who live a really long time, and there are very few of them in existence. And it's really interesting couple books. He's working on the third book now. So I mean, those are three that stick out to me.
I have to check those out. Add them to my list of things to read.
Like one thing I like with Edward Savio's books, I found him because I listen to a lot of Audible, and he has Will Wheaton narrate his books, and so I like Will Wheaton's narration, which he also does Ernest Cline books. And the guy that does the Magic 2.0 books is fantastic. I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, but he's awesome. He may be my new favorite narrator.
Oh wow! I noticed there didn't see an option for audiobook for Sylas Sterling. The
Not
first
yet.
book. Is other plans to do that?
There is a way. I think it's called ACX. There's a way for people to have audiobooks added to Amazon as like an independent person, publisher, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like I don't think I want to pay someone else to do it just because I don't want to spend $1,000 to do it or more. Like, I mean, I looked on like Fiverr because, you can get people to do all sorts of things on Fiverr. Like that's where I got to do my book trailer. I found a guy on Fiverr to do that. But yeah, like I think that the around $1,000 to $2,000 is what seems to be like most of the people's going rate on that particular site for audiobook of around 50,000 words. I mean, I don't know if it's quite 50,000, but it's in the neighborhood. So yeah, I don't foresee that anytime in the near future. And I'd like to do it myself, but I don't think I'd do a very good job. So
no, you don't think so?
I don't think I would do a good job like keeping all the characters separate because I wouldn't want to just read the book. I'd want to like act it out. Because I mean that's my favorite part of the people who are really good like narrators is all the different characters. And I mean I do a lot of bad impressions, but I wouldn't want to do my bad impressions for my characters. I don't know. So and that's pretty much what I would end up doing if I were to do it. So
well, I thought the trailer came out pretty cool. I thought it looks pretty good. I was impressed with it.
Oh, thanks.
The book. Yeah.
There's a website called Mixkit, Mixkit. I think it's .co instead of .com, but they have free, royalty-free music and images and videos you can download to use for videos, YouTube, whatever. So you can have background music, you can have B-roll, that kind of thing, which is really awesome for free, especially, and then not to have any claims on it or whatever. That's kind of a problem on YouTube if you have something that's copyrighted.
They'll slap your hand right away. How do you deal with writer's block?
I quit writing. I mean, basically, like I stopped writing for almost 3 years. The last time I just couldn't figure out what to do, and I just stopped. And I don't know that I wrote much of anything else in between. I mean, I write things, but not like stories. Like I don't know how many words I write in emails every day. It's quite a few, but but yeah, I think I'm pretty sure there was right around a 3-year break from the first 60-70% of Sylas to the last 30-40%.
Yeah. Was it difficult coming back to the story and remembering all the different, all the different plot lines and everything to reconnect them?
Not too much. I mean, I would think about it. It wasn't that I totally abandoned it in my head. I would still try to ruminate on it, whatever the word it would be, of trying to come up with ideas or trying to, what would I do next? What's going to happen here? I mean, it wasn't always in the forefront, but it was definitely never just completely forgotten.
Yeah.
And I would go back and reread it. And I also, one thing I do occasionally just to help me find errors is I'll have Word read it to me, like have it just speak it out. It doesn't sound great, but I can hear it when I don't see that I missed the, a little A or an an or the, or just something small.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
So now that you've gone through the process of having your book out there and people are reading it and it's a big accomplishment, If someone came to you now and said they want to write a book and they're asking you for advice, what advice would you give them?
I mean, mostly it would be keep going. I mean, I honestly did kind of stop for a long time, but I didn't give up. I mean, I didn't, because it'd be easy to give up. But yeah, it does feel like an accomplishment to finish a book, and actually, hit the button and publish it. I mean, yeah, it'd be cooler if it was from, a publishing house, I guess, contract and all those things. But I mean, I was interesting. Like, I don't do much Facebook anymore. I'm just not much of a fan of Facebook. I like Twitter. I like Instagram. But anyway, I posted on Facebook after about a week after the book had come out, and I was really amazed how many people that I haven't seen in 10 years, 20 years, depending on who they were excited and, like, wow, congratulations, this is awesome, that kind of stuff. Like, so anyway, for the people who are writing, I actually had a friend from college contact me 2 days ago asking some questions, which I'm like, that's awesome. I'll be glad to tell you whatever I can. I'm not one of those people who would want to, keep my little secret of, oh, this is how I publish my book, you can't know. Like, no, like I don't care. I would be glad to help. So yeah, I actually sent her some of the links that Jeff sent me as far as agents, because that was one of the things she was really interested in. And I think she's going to send me a copy of the manuscript at some point so I can like read over it. So I mean, that'd be cool. So yeah, I don't care. I'd be glad to help anybody I could.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. And I bet that was a little satisfying to have someone reach out to you and ask you, because it is a big accomplishment to have your book out there. And that's, so the fact that you're willing to help someone out is, I think that's good. Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's daunting.
If me being able to answer a couple little questions can help them publish their book, that'd be good. That'd be great. And I mean, I'm excited for them that they are going to do that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us had a lot of free time the last year, maybe not, depends on your circumstances specifically, but like last year, one of the things I finally worked on was my book. But the other thing I worked on a lot last year was my wife started doing Skillshare classes. And so, so for, I don't know how many weeks in a row, like 8 or 9 weeks in a row, we put out a Skillshare class every week, which was a lot of time of editing. Like I would spend hours and hours and hours editing all the little, the different little clips of the different things. But again, we had a more time at home than we normally would. So we made use of it to try to, better ourselves and do something different and new. And yeah, I think that's something everybody could do, no matter what their circumstance is. With technology these days, you can do what you want to do. I mean, there's things you shouldn't do, I guess, legally and morally or whatever. But if you want to write a book, write a book. If you want to make a comic book, make a comic book. I mean, if you want to make a toy, get a 3D printer, make some toys. I mean, cool. I mean, I don't have one of those, but you can do it. I mean, it's kind of amazing the stuff we can do nowadays.
Yeah.
Like YouTube. I mean, you can have, not that you will specifically, but you literally can have a worldwide audience from your living room or your spare bedroom or whatever it is. It's kind of crazy.
It is wild. Yeah, it is crazy. Were you a computer nerd back in the 90s?
No, I mean, I didn't actually own a computer until after I graduated college.
Oh wow!
Like, we used computers in high school, but most of the time it was to play stupid games. Like we played Oregon Trail or Dino Park Tycoon or something with a dinosaur. I don't know. I remember playing Castles 2.
Castles, yeah.
It was like Ages of Empire before Ages of Empire. It was real basic. But yeah, like through college, there was like the computer labs on campus, and some of my roommates had computers, some didn't. But yeah, I didn't actually buy one until I was out of college.
Wow.
Of course, that was kind of a different age, I guess.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, it doesn't always feel like it, but it was.
But yeah, that's one of the things, like with the book, it's nice that it's set in the 90s because you don't have a smartphone. And, Sylas Sterling can't pull out a smartphone. What's this? Where's the, how do I get here? Like the things that we take for granted that are still kind of amazing, but it's just so commonplace it doesn't seem amazing anymore. I don't know. Yeah.
That was another one of my questions I had written down. I noticed a lot of horror movies and suspense movies and books. They take place before. A lot of them take place before all
Yeah.
that because it's too easy to say. Well, they could just pick up their phone and call for help, or they can
All
just
right.
turn on their GPS and find their way home. So
Yeah.
I thought that was. You see a lot more entertainment going towards. I wonder if that's part of the reason why movies and television and
Hmm.
books are being based in that time period, because it's too easy now for you to find your way home or to call
Yeah.
for help.
Absolutely. I mean, like my watch, if I hold the button down long enough, it'll call 911.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Too easy, right?
And I've accidentally called 911 a couple times, but no one ever called me back, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah,
No one showed
that's.
up and no one called me back, so I guess it's okay.
I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but
Yeah.
um, so what did you learn writing the first book that you're going to take and implement in the rest of the series?
Hmm.
What are some lessons you learned?
Like I don't know specifically, honestly, top of my head. Um, I know that I can do it, so that's a good lesson. And
Mhm.
so I think the next book will be finished much quicker than the last. I mean, I don't think it'll take 3 years. I think it would. I mean, I think if I was dedicated and had like a carved out the time every day, I think I could probably finish a book in like 3 months,
Oh wow.
probably. I mean, realistically, just based on the amount of time I actually spent writing and well, maybe not maybe editing, so maybe 4 months. Um, but I don't know. Like I mean, I've written almost 20,000 words since I finished this first book, and I haven't been super consistent of like writing every day.
Yeah.
Um, Now, granted, that's between two different projects, and really I have a third project I've been working on too. So that's been taking some time away from that, apart from just normal job things and other things. But I don't know. I definitely have some have some a little different perspective, I guess, going into the second book, which is good. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be easier overall. I don't know specifically what lesson that'll. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, I can tell you selfishly, I want to know what happens. So I hope that you are done it for once, because I want to read the next one.
I'd like to be done this summer. I mean, the summer's not here yet. So summer goes to what, September?
Hmm.
I think that's realistic. I mean, that's 5 months away.
That's not bad.
I think that's a fairly realistic goal, and I think that's something I need. And maybe this is a lesson I learned from the first book. I finally gave myself a goal to finish the book. Like, okay, I'm this far into it. I'm working on it again. I need to have a date. I need to have something in mind. Okay, this needs to be done by such and such. And I think I'd set that to be. Um, Originally, I was hoping like the end of October because I mean it's tied around Halloween,
Oh, okay.
and it got pushed into about midway of November. But had I not made a goal of October or Halloween, I wouldn't have made it in November. So I need to have a goal set. Like I want to have my book done by July or whatever the thing is. So okay, if I finish it in August, great. But yeah, I think that's a lesson I learned. So yeah, need to have a goal.
So if you finish, let's say you finished a book today, um, how long does a process take for you to have it? Let's if you decide to go with Amazon again for the second book, how long does that process take before it's available for purchase? Is that a long process when once you have the book done, or is it pretty instant?
It's pretty fast. I hit the camera. Sorry. It's pretty fast once you have your stuff ready. Like as I'm writing the second book, I'm formatting it as I go. Like I have the fonts, the same fonts. I have the same like chapter headings as I have in the first book that tell you when it is and where you are,
Mhm.
which I think that's helpful. I don't know that a lot of books do that, but I liked it, especially
Yeah,
because I knew I was going to jump back and forth. And so I tried to draw attention to here's 1993 at the or here's 1986 at the top, just to say, pay attention. We're in a different time zone, because that was one of the things I got from feedback of people reading it early on before I had finished, completing everything, that they were a little confused when what was happening. Like it switched from the high school to the sheriff, and I'm like, wait, what? so yeah, that was one of those little things. But yeah, it wouldn't take long. Like at this point, I mean, it would take a little while. So if I finished writing today, I would probably let it sit there for a few days, go back and try to reread and edit some. I would order proof copies, and then I'd let a few people read it. I'd read it again, and so it would be at least a few weeks at the minimum. But then once it was done within a day or two, it can be ready to publish. I mean, it's super fast. Like the Kindle version gets uploaded quicker than the paperback version. Like I think it took 7 or 8 hours for the Kindle version and maybe 12 hours for the paperback once I actually hit the button. It wasn't long.
That's pretty quick.
Now I had also had some previous experience with Kindle KDP stuff, and I'd already made the book 3 times as far as the proof copies. So that also helps. It was like by the time I was ready, I knew it was just, upload this file again, preview it, okay, approve. I mean, it was an easy process having done it. And that was another reason, or another person or whatever, that I was encouraged to finish my book. Last year, I helped my wife publish the second book. She's a painter, and she's illustrated 3 children's books. She hasn't written the books, but she's illustrated them. And so I helped her format the second book that she illustrated. And then I helped them set that up in Kindle, the KDP thing and all that stuff. And so that helped being familiar with that whole process before getting to it with my book a lot. Because if you go into that cold, I could see where that would take more time and more effort or whatever.
So any plans to convert your novel to a graphic novel and have your wife illustrate it?
I don't plan to do a novel or graphic novel of the story of Sylas Sterling, but I do plan to do Sylas Sterling's comic book, if that makes sense. Because in the first book, I talk about him wanting to draw comics. He goes to art class. He's an artist. In the second book, where I've already written, he's planning some ideas for characters and a situation for like a comic story. And so once I wrote that, I was like, well, it's super easy to do stuff. I also helped my wife do a coloring book, and a coloring book is like 30 pages. So that's about the length of a comic book. You can make the size. I can make the size of a comic book. So I literally can make a comic book through Amazon. And so I'm gonna make a comic book through Amazon. I'm not sure how fantastic the artwork will be, but I've worked on that. I've gotten, I don't know, the cover. I mean, a basic cover. It's not finished, but like the basic idea for the cover, like the first 7 or 8 pages laid out in Photoshop. So what I want to do is have, whenever the second book is published, I want to have this comic book go out at the same time, and then something similar when the third book goes up.
Oh wow, that's cool. That sounds neat.
So like a tie-in more than an adaptation.
Yeah. Oh wow, looking forward to that. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it should be cool.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. I've wanted to write a novel since college. I wanted to do a comic book or a cartoon since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And so, but again, it's 2021. There's lots of resources. You can do just about anything you want to if you have the time. And that's really the biggest constraint, I guess, for most people, is just the time to invest into it.
Yeah.
But it's out. The resources are out there, and I mean, it doesn't cost anything if you do it yourself to publish on Amazon. You just have to have the time to create whatever it is you want to create and then upload it. So.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I wanted to try and get into some spoiler chat.
Sure.
About the book. So I'll add it to the chapter notes, but we'll be talking some spoilers. So whoever hasn't read it, go ahead and skip ahead to the end. But so I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but were there were no local folklore or any crimes that you kind of pulled from to kind of get the idea behind the curse and the family and the crimes and or even just like the haunted house or the mysterious house?
Not particularly. Some of that stuff, like in my mind, I was envisioning. Um, have you seen the movie Fletch or Fletch Lives?
It's been a while, but yeah.
I was kind of envisioning the plantation house from Fletch Lives that was just falling apart.
Yeah.
Just because I like random old movies and things. And in some ways, almost like one of the old episodes of Scooby Doo. There's one where it's the one that was okay. So I watched most, or not most, maybe about half of the Supernatural show on CW. Um, and so I saw like the first 7 or 8 seasons, and I haven't seen anything since then until they made the Scooby Doo episode or Scooby Natural or whatever they called it. And so they put Sam and Dean from that show into an old Scooby Doo episode where there's like this um, southern, like almost like a Confederate thing. I don't know. It was kind of random, but so anyway, I kind of envisioned like this, but a combination of Fletch and Scooby Doo when I envisioned this house. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I did like that. I think you mentioned earlier that the way the story really it sets up a lot, and it seems, I don't say mundane, but it seems just everyday life.
Yeah.
And then it really puts the pedal to the metal at the end. Was that intentional to kind of have the story speed up and to get the reader comfortable and to kind of get everything established and then really start unraveling the mystery?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like one thing originally I had the second chapter as the prologue, since it happened before the rest of the events. And I moved it to the second chapter because I thought it was more interesting than the regular story. I like the sheriff, like Sheriff Durant, and that whole thing that was like one of my favorite parts. And I kind of in my brain there, I was kind of visioning Hopper from Stranger Things, more or less. And so I moved him to the second chapter just to draw, like you said, kind of the more just here's what's going on. Here's our main guy. Yeah, it's just super nerdy. He's got posters of Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones, and he's got Nintendo powers and all these things laying around his bedroom. And but yeah, like one of my friends, I'd let him read the book before I published it, and the thing that got him was in I guess it was the third chapter, fourth chapter, I forget, maybe fourth chapter is when the announcement comes that there's been a car wreck and that one of the students in the school's been killed and the other one's in the hospital. And he thought that was like a really powerful moment. And like to me, some of that was really drawn from some experiences from high school. Like we had several people in our, not necessarily my class or grade or whatever, but people in our schools, things like that happened. A guy died on the way to school one day, and I'm pretty sure they canceled school, sent people home, brought in counselors, that kind of stuff. Another one of my friends committed suicide my senior year in high school. And I think they did something kind of like that again. So there was a few things that are kind of random, but they're kind of drawn from weird experiences in a small town, in a small high school. But yeah, the action definitely moves along as we get going. Because yeah, there's not a lot of action for a while.
I think I lost you when you started to say your friend. I called you, and I think we lost connection or something there for a second.
So when I'm trying to think what year this was. I think in my junior year of high school, one of my classmates, a guy I knew, but it wasn't like a good friend, but he died on the way to school in a car wreck.
Oh.
Then my senior year, one of my friends who was a year younger than me committed suicide. And so I'm pretty sure if I remember right, both of those times our school kind of shut down because it was like this traumatic thing that had happened, which is kind of where I got that idea from in the book where Beth is dead and the other girl, Tracy. Yeah, I was like blanking. Tracy is in the hospital. And so I get Tracy and Elise mixed up in my brain for some reason, just the two of the sisters. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure, I don't know about the suicide, but I'm pretty sure with the car wreck, I'm pretty sure they canceled school and brought in, like the next day, they brought in like pastors and things from the local churches to talk to people just because it was a traumatic event.
It is pretty heavy stuff, especially that age.
Yeah.
Definitely. There was the god or the entity, and I did look it up because I was wondering if you had, and I can't pronounce the name, I'm trying to find it now, but I
The
did
lady
look it
who
up, and I'm sorry.
lady who was killed.
Yeah, and there was an A. It starts with an A.
I think it's Apophenia.
Okay, I didn't want to butcher the name.
How it's pronounced, but
Okay,
it means something. You looked up what it meant.
yeah, I did look it up, and I wasn't sure if I found the wrong maybe the wrong site, but how does that fit in with the story? Because I may have
If
found the
it,
wrong one.
I think the meaning of the word should be something whereas people see things like or see patterns in things that aren't necessarily there. Is that kind of the definition you found?
Kind of, yeah.
Um, and my thing with the book is the curse might be real. The curse might not be real. Some people thought it was real, and that's all it took. Bad things happen for like 102 years or whatever the number is, 104 years. I forget exactly, but these terrible things happen because the people thought it was real, even if it wasn't real. And so I kind of like that whole idea. I know some people don't. Of at the end of the story, you find out things aren't necessarily supernatural, even they look supernatural.
Yeah.
Um, I'm personally a fan of that, and I haven't like that's not necessarily the case here. But
Oh, okay. I was going to ask.
well, I mean, no, I'm not trying to like spoil that or whatever. But I like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like some people hated The Village, for example.
Oh,
I
I
like
like
The
that.
Village.
I liked it.
Like I went to see The Village with a friend and his girlfriend at the time, and both of them thought it was going to be a monster movie. And so when they found out it wasn't a monster movie, they weren't like, I don't know if they were mad, but they were disappointed because it wasn't what they expected. I'm like, well, have you seen an M. Night Shyamalan movie? But I like that it was just the people dressing up as monsters.
Yeah.
Like there's a deleted scene where it wasn't the people dressing up as monsters; there really were monsters, and that would have been cool too. Um, but yeah, M. Night Shyamalan has done that a few times in his movies, where something looks supernatural, but it actually has a rational explanation.
Yeah.
And then not to say that this case does, because like obviously Silas was seeing the past in his dreams. He was seeing some things in the present in his dreams. There's something is going on there outside of himself. So there is some sort of premonition things happening. So there's still, so yeah. So I'm not saying that the curse isn't real or not, but I just think I think that is an interesting. People could see it either way, I guess, if that makes sense.
And that did surprise me at the end when you find out what where it originated and what these people believe, and you start to wonder. There's a movie, I don't know if you've seen it, a horror movie. Forget the name of it now, but at the end, this woman is marrying her fiance, and they have this game.
Oh yeah,
where they have to kill each other, or they have to kill if you survive, you get to marry into the family, and otherwise everyone will die if this person isn't killed. I forget the name of it now, but
I've seen the trailer for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it kind of reminded me like that, because you go back and forth whether is this really happening, or do they just believe this is what's supposed to happen. And so at the end, I was surprised. At the end of the book, I was surprised on how you did that, because I didn't expect that. I thought it was going to be completely supernatural, or there's something like more. I thought it would veer towards more of a horror story and less of. So I thought that did surprise me. So.
Well, one of the things at the end, have you ever watched Doctor Who?
A few times.
Like during the Christopher Eccleston run as the Doctor, like, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, there's this one episode where he time travels, I think it's around World War II, and there's all these kids in gas mask on. I don't know if that rings a bell on any. Anyway, so near the end of that episode, Christopher Eccleston says, for just this once, everybody lives. And so that's part of the end of the story anyway. I was thinking about that as I was writing the end. I'm like, well, do I kill Daniel? Does this, what happens here? And I'm like, okay, it's the first book. Everybody lives. But only because it's the first book. Because, I mean, the stakes have to be raised in some sort of a way, I guess, as things move along throughout whatever happens. And so, okay, everybody lives. Like all the bad guys live, all the good guys live. I mean, the only people who died were dead before the story started.
Yeah, I didn't think Daniel would make it. I thought something would happen to him. He would be He kind of set the stage. I didn't think he'd make it, but
Yeah.
sounds
Well,
like there's a.
like in that particular point, I feel like he should have been killed, but the guy just didn't do it. Like, I took care of him, but he didn't actually take care of him just because I don't know. Like the people do evil things, but they think they're doing it for good reasons. Like most good villains, like, if you ask them, like, oh, we're doing the right thing for our community, even though they're doing horrible things. So I don't know. It's an odd concept a little bit, I think.
No, I liked it. It was good.
It does remind me of, like, I don't think it was too derivative of anything overall, personally. Like, I think there was definitely inspiration from here and there. There is an episode of Supernatural early on that reminds me somewhat of what happened here, at least just a smidge. I don't remember which one specifically. There's one with a scarecrow. I don't know if you ever watched that particular show, but there was some kind of town that, like, tourists went and got killed by a scarecrow fairly regularly, like once a year or something. That, and it blessed their crops or something.
Oh wow!
I don't know, but that's the one thing I could think of that is kind of similar. I don't know. I'm sure there's things out. I mean, it's not like I've read everything or seen everything. There could be lots of things similar, but to my limited knowledge, I don't think it's too derivative of anything.
Was that something you tried to avoid of being derivative and staying away from repeating someone else's work? Was that a big concern for you?
Well, I mean, I know there's some authors will be like, oh, I'm a big fan of Star Wars and I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings, so I smushed them together and there's my story. And that's cool if that's what you want to do. I'd rather make something different than just here's another version of Star Wars or here's another version. And I think that's why I don't want to do fantasy or space stuff, because I feel like I would kind of rip off Star Trek, Star Wars, Firefly, whatever. And the same thing with fantasy. I'd rip off Lord of the Rings. I'd rip off The Hobbit, same difference. And I'd rip off some stuff from Narnia. I don't know. I guess everybody sort of does because Tolkien was so good at it, but I don't know. I don't know that I have much to offer in those types of arenas, which is, I don't know. They always say, write what you know. Well, I remember the 90s pretty well, and what I don't remember, I can Google, so that helps.
Yeah. It does help. Good old Google.
Yeah.
So thanks again for taking the time to chat. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, so I want to thank you again. And everyone, go out and pick up the book. It's available on Amazon via Kindle Unlimited, or you can buy the paper copy. I'm weird. I like we talked about, I like having the book and having the music in my hands and putting little tabs and everything in it. So
yeah.
Thanks again for sitting down to chat with me for a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Anytime, barring, work-related things.
Yeah, of course. Where can people find you? Where can people find out more about, your social media or?
There'sjallentucker.com, author J Allen on Twitter, author J Allen Tucker on Instagram, author J Allen Tucker on YouTube. I've got a couple videos up there. Should have a third one the next couple days. I don't know specifically. Probably by the end of this week. I have a Goodreads page. I haven't done a whole lot with that. I've got the Amazon author page. I don't know. There's definitely a few places people can find out more.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, and congratulations on getting the book out there. It's I think it's a big accomplishment getting it done, and I'm sure it's a big hill to climb when you're first getting into it. So I'm glad we were able to connect, and I was able to find it and read it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So thanks again for sitting down with me.
Yes, sir.
Bye, everybody.